I think the starting point for the design of Away was my knowledge of the play from seeing one or two past productions, and then the gap that existed when I read the script. So the things from the story that I read in the script that didn't linger with me. And in the case of the play Away, it was the bookending and framing of the play within the Shakespearean Midsummer Night's Dream and King Lear. So my first instinct was to want to make them a very theatrical beginning, and to make the Storm a very theatrical thing in that the play is framed by other plays. So then I talked to Matthew, and we sort of talked about, what in particular what Midsummer Night's Dream and King Lear were, and in the case of Midsummer Night's Dream, it was like a forest that was topsy-turvy, that it was upside down, it was desolate because of the dilemma within the play. So taking that look at Midsummer Night's Dream, and then the King Lear, which was the storm is like passing through the portal towards death, became the hook for the play, really, and for my design, and therefore passing through from one world to another, or passing through something, a doorway, and the clearing of something. So the storm created a tempest, but then what was left was stillness afterwards. That was essentially what the idea I was designing. It was also liberated by Matt wanting to say that he said if the production was a student production, he wasn't interested in any kind of infantile school comment on what drama should be. He said to me something really helpful, which was, imagine that Peter Brook was that school teacher. It was 3 years before his famous Midsummer Night's Dream. So imagine that, in the case of Damien Ryan, who started as a school teacher, there is an inspired direction. And so that liberated what the opening was. So that was a great starting point for discovering what the play could be. So the transition from the storm, we set up a very bleak forest that is essentially a wooden floor, and very spindly, almost after a fire kind of environment where the bones and the skull of the donkey is the donkey mask, for instance, and Oberon and Titania in bone-like kind of very unromantic versions of Midsummer Night's Dream. So then, from that very dark, black world, which is just open to the theatre and quite tough, it just there is a slot in the floor, and from the back of this platform that they've been acting on, it's hinged on the back line, and we just lifted up what look like the trees are actually chains that pick up the front of the floor, and underneath is completely white, and a slot in the floor means that you can walk through like a doorway into the white world of transition, maybe through the transition of death, of time, or that sort of environment. But it's also the literal environment of what the beach is, and that whiteness, that cleanness, that clearing away of what a storm does. It washes away debris. Yeah. So that's what you're left with then is a very sharp. So and also it's got a horizon line in it that is from the beach. The play away is very Shakespearean in its in that it makes very few demands on the scenery. Everything that is every environment that you're in is kind of described within the text. So therefore the text makes no demands from the design. It doesn't say, oh, go and get that cup and put it on that table over there and bring this and that. So therefore the words and the language can be said just standing within an open stage, much of the way that Shakespeare wrote for the stage at his time. And subsequently the productions exist that are on bare stage. So with that premise, I did then need to balance the kind of the domestic with that epic kind of production, and really only Act Two made any kind of suggestion that some sort of props would be helpful for the advancement of the ideas in the scene. They may have been the only part of the script that I felt was being conveyed while in action, and that action is packing up to go away. So the idea of moving from your home and putting your things into something else. So I came up with the idea of a kind of a wardrobe, a magical wardrobe that is first featured in Midsummer Night's Dream, but then it becomes utilitarian, that people are packing. And each family, I had to show this kind of economic strata that they were in, and show a differentiation between the three families and how wealthy they are. So I did that with the suitcases that they bring, and the quality and the number and the size of the suitcase, and then what was packed gets increased with each family. And Vic and Harry are the poor of the three, and then there's the middle family, which is Gwen and Jim, and then the headmaster. And a headmaster in 1968 was probably the highest paid public servant that would have a job in our community often. So, they can afford to go to the Gold Coast. So we really had to tell that story within Act Two. So the wardrobe was sort of born from that, and it also gave us, somewhere to put props. But it was more to show the theme of packing up to go away. Well, to sort of pick up on the 1960s references, it's not only one of my favourite periods because it's the period of my early childhood, but Matthew wanted to tread very lightly over the period. So when you're researching the period, I'm not looking for things that look like that would induce people to giggle and point, or feel like their characters are at a 1960s costume party. So you just make very self-effacing and very kind of truthful depictions of what people actually wore then, and only very few people wore all the really bright, what we call the 60s colours and prints, and maybe 1 out of 5, or in this case 8, may have a print. And looking at those sorts of choices, and looking at your actual family photographs or photographs of families on holidays, and thinking, if you wore that now and walked into the room, would that induce laughter, or would it be able to cross over any period? And many clothes have period clothes have the ability to do that, and that is be kind of able to cross over. So that sort of was the kind of way we treated the 60s period, which then gave us simplicity to the design, which then was what I talked about before with the Shakespearean presentation. That too sort of lent itself to that kind of simplicity, and just to avoid sentiment and nostalgia in the period. And the period existed because of its. It was the story of the writer, his story, and it was also the framework of the times of changing teenagers and within the framework of the Vietnam War. Well, the way Matt has directed it, the Midsummer Night's Dream at the beginning is clearly like an edited version of the play in its little vignettes from the play. So it's sort of like seeing a showreel kind of version as a prelude to the play. And so then the first actual speech of the play is Puck's final speech from Midsummer Night's Dream. But we're seeing as if we saw a speeded up version of it, really. So I virtually designed our production of Midsummer Night's Dream, and they do not cross over that much. There were maybe light touches in terms of the costume of Titania to maybe the style of Coral, given I was given that doubling, but that was not a given. Where I got a lot of the period clothes to tell the story of Midsummer Night's Dream, that would be actually like doing it in modern day dress. So there's the lovers are in cricket clothes from the time, and the girls are in tennis outfits, as if they were kids doing a modern production, which would have been very radical then. And then when it's Pyramus and Thisbe, then that's the first time we have fun, and they're kind of Greek versions of 60s costumes. So yeah, there are crossovers in that it would have been a modern day or 1967 version of modern day Midsummer Night's Dream.